Hi, everybody. This is Coach here to talk to you about how to create these neat correlation graphs to show relationships between economic indicators and returns of securities. Doesn't have to be stocks, it can be stocks, bonds, or in my case here, stocks to bonds, or bonds to stocks. So what I'm going to show you is how I use FactSet to create this chart. Let me first show you what this chart is. So you can see there's a relationship between the gold line and the black line. Well, the gold line is just annual changes in the US dollar, the trade weighted broad index. So when this dollar index goes up, so this is an annual change, 1 year change, when it goes up, it seems to be that the black line also goes up. Didn't work quite as well as here as if you look at over here. So something's going on. There's some kind of relationship between the gold and the black. So when the dollar is strong, government bonds beat the S&P 500. So this on the black is looking at government bond returns and a 1 year return of government bonds minus the returns of the S&P 500 and equity index. So when the dollar does well, like here is the left axis, so it's up about 15%. Government bonds, well, it's the right axis, they're not underperforming stocks as much. So it tells you whatever's going on that's probably driving up the dollar is also making the risk off government bond asset perform better than normal relative to the risk on asset, which is the S&P 500. Now, typically when I create a graph like this, I'm looking at some economic data, which is the gold line. I normally make my I normally make my dependent variable the black line on the right axis, and I make my independent variable on the left axis. For me, so I can always remember without having to look at the L and R, I try to make my left axis the gold line and the right axis the black line. Now that's just me. You can do whatever you want, but tend to be the independent variable, which is the economy. I would use that on the left axis. In my particular case, I'm doing 3 securities relative to the other. The dollar being a security and government bonds to the S&P 500 to show you kind of a long-short strategy related to the dollar. Now, I've talked to you before over time about what drives the dollar. When interest rates of the U.S. rise relative to the world, the dollar normally goes up. When the U.S. economy is relatively strong relative to the world, the dollar normally goes up. So we could have another graph that shows the relationship between the economy and the dollar, and then you could show, all right, well, when the dollar is strong, what else do you want to do? Well, you probably don't want to own stocks. You probably want to go into the risk off asset government bonds. Okay, with that intro, I want to show you how I created this. So all I had to do is download a date range from FactSet. This is a code. S&P 500, the price data. Actually, I'm using total return data here for the S&P 500. I also wanted to do it for some government index, so I use FTSE US government bond in the local return, so that one. And then I had to do an exchange rate, and this exchange rate is the nominal trade weighted dollar broad definition, using 2006 100 as the index starting point. So where did I get this data? Well, I'm going to create a new tab, and I'm just going to download this data. Now, I like to have my labels, right above the columns. So I'm going to skip down a couple rows, and when I download data, I want to be, let's see, an A3 here. So I want to be an A3 over here. Now, you need to make sure if you're downloading data that you have the FactSet ribbon up here. So FactSet should be right around here. And since we're downloading a time series of data, a bunch of data over time, When we download, we want to do insert formula, and I click this little down arrow here, and I go series lookup. Now, the first time you pull this up in FactSet, it may take a little bit longer. I did this a little earlier today, so this shouldn't take this long to pull up this menu, okay? So I need to look up S&P 500. I need to look up the dollar, and I need to look up this FTSE index. First of all, you can apply a bunch of country weights, filters, because there's literally, my guess is millions of pieces of data here. An S&P 50, there's 534,100 things with S&P 500 in it. So you may want to set some filters by region, country, etc. So when you're looking through this, you're not a little overwhelmed with the number of data items. Now, with that being said, I find the more popular ones tend to be listed first. So the ticker symbol that FactSet has for S&P 500 is SP50. There's also a ticker symbol SPX, but it's already here, and this is the total return index I want. Now, over on the right, you show what is the start period to the end period, and then the frequency. I like monthly. I pull all my data down monthly. If it's quarterly data and I put monthly there, it still pulls in the data over monthly, so I can easily create my graphs later on. If it's quarterly, the data doesn't line up, okay? I need everything the same frequency. But if it's quarterly data, then, and I do monthly, then it just shows me the same data for 3 months in a row. So I'm going to do minus 30 years, because I want to know how this works over several economic cycles. Because normally on the left axis, you're going to do some economic variable. On the right axis, you're going to try to show some return of an asset relative to another. So minus 30 years, and then I set the latest to just the latest completed period. And I have monthly, and I click on that S&P 500, and I just say add series. There it is. I got the data. Now, nominal trader weighted dollar. Well, it's not under equities, it's under exchange rates. So the nominal trade weighted dollar, and I can make this a little bit bigger, and this is major currencies. Is this the one I wanted? So I think I did broad currencies. All right, so this is the broad definition. And I can make this bigger so you can see what's on the right. Now, normally when I'm choosing, you notice I could actually get this daily, but I'm going to make it monthly. You have the date ranges. So you may sometimes have lots of different data items, and you want the one with, and you want to do a 20-year chart, but only has 15 years of data. Well, there may be another data item that's close to the one that you're looking for that has longer date range. So I sometimes look at that date range. You have the source here too. This is the Federal Reserve. So I'm just going to add that right there. So now I have the dollar. So now I need the government bond index. So I know it's FTSE. And I go to equity indexes. Notice how the reason why I don't just click on all these, like I click on economic, there's nothing. And I click on the category that just helps filter things out. So I'm not doing, looking at as many securities. So that's equity indexes. I need to do fixed income indices. So I have all these ones for FTSE. I could, but I could go in here and there's the FTSE. Now there's over 100,000 of these. Which one do I want? I wanted a US Gov, and I wanted something local currencies. And I wanted a total return index. I think this may be the one. Now, once I have the ticker symbol, I could just, if I know the ticker symbol, I could just search for the ticker symbol instead. Well, I'm going to use this one, even if it's not the same ticker symbol as the graph that I showed you earlier. But I think it is, because it seems to be BUSL seems familiar to me, so I'm going to click on that. Now on the bottom, we have the OK button. Now I could create my year over year statistics right in here. I prefer to do it in Excel, just download the raw data and then create the annual changes. But if I wanted to do the annual changes right in here, I would click on this little button, and then here's a growth rate, and then I have 1 year change in this. But like I say, I like to download the raw data so I can really see what I'm doing, what the formulas are, and I like to do it right in Excel. Now, if I do this in interactive charting within FactSet, not within Excel, then I would make the changes at this stage. And I'll show you how to do that a little later. Right, so it's going to download the data. Now, the neat thing about these graphs is once they're created, if you want to update this later on, so another month has gone by, all you have to do is just highlight the data and you go up here and you click refresh and selection. Now, you could just hit the refresh button, but if you have many, many, many tabs and many spreadsheets open and you hit this, it's going to try to download it for all your spreadsheets, and that could take a little while. So normally I just highlight the area of the data I want to do, and I just hit refresh to selection, and it goes out and re-gets the data for the new month, and it'll update the charts. Now this is always doing minus 30 years, that's this, to times 0, and monthly. If for some reason your data comes in and it's daily, sometimes that happens with FactSet, all you have to do is go and adjust this. So if I say I want a daily instead of monthly over 30 years, I would just make that a D, and this is an array. So if I hit return, well, to tell you the truth, it's not an array, but normally it comes down as array. If I hit return, it would give me a problem, like you can't change an array. To change an array, you have to hit the Control, Shift, and Enter key when you change in these little things. So notice now it says daily though, and it says calc, there's no data. It's because I haven't downloaded it. So I got to highlight the B, hit refresh. And now I have daily data. So if you look at the date range, is the first column, and you go all the way down to the bottom, this is when I'm creating it. The latest month when I'm creating this is after March of 2023, but this just keeps on going on and on and on and on and on because it's daily data instead of monthly, so there's more data there. So, but I want to change this back to monthly. Now, monthly data was already downloaded before, so when I change it to monthly, I don't have to hit refresh again because it's already there. Now, I don't like this date format because if I put this in a graph, it just doesn't look good, right? So I just want to change this. So you can see the minus 30 years, 0 monthly. So 0 means to today. And if I want to change the format of this, I just do MMYY, and you get 2 numbers for the month and 2 numbers for the year, and that, when we create the graph later on, just looks much, much better. So I want to look at annual changes in the dollar, and I want to look at how government bonds do relative to S&P 500. So I need to calculate a few return columns. So I wanted to do an annual return, so it starts on 3, goes here, so I'm going to do this divided by that minus 1, that's the annual return for the currency over that period. And if I just double click on the little down, this little button, the square on the bottom right, it fills it in for the rest all the way down to the very end. And that works if you make the, well, it actually kept on going beyond there. Normally it would have stopped here, but since I had this extra data for the daily, it kept on going on because this would have actually copied it all the way down to the end of this daily data. If I hadn't done that and changed this to daily, it would have stopped these calculations right here, okay? And I can't, don't think I can get rid of, yeah, because this is considered part of array. I can't change any part of array now that I make that daily. But I could go like this, highlight this, and I can go Control Shift and hit the down arrow, and it goes all the way down to the bottom. So it fits my formula there. All right, now I'm going to move this over one column because in order to calculate the annual return to S&P 500, I just have to copy that over because then it copied over the formulas. And then I do the same over here. And now I have the formula for the return of the government bond. What I wanted to have is a graph of this return of the dollar versus how does bonds do relative to stocks. So I'm going to do another column where I'm just doing bond returns minus stock returns. And that's the relative returns of bonds to stocks. So this is US Gov minus S&P 500 1 year return, and I'm going to make that on the right axis, so I always make sure to note which axis it is, and this is US dollar nominal, actually, yeah, let's just do US dollar trade weighted, and that was broad definition. And this was a 1 year return, and that's left. So if I change and move this over here, so all I did is cut and paste to make these next to each other, I can highlight both of these, go all the way down to the end, and then I can just go insert this and insert, and then I went to this graph, and then I have a graph. The graph looks horrible though. First of all, it doesn't even have a date range, and they're both on the same axes. So I need to do some fixing. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of this chart title. I need to figure out which one is which. So this is the right axis. This is the left axis on the dollar. I need to get some labels. I need to get some dates. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to do Control X of the graph, and I'm going to go all the way back to the top so I can see which column is which. And I'm going to also freeze page, so when I scroll down, I don't lose track of the titles for the columns. So view, freeze panes, move this maybe up here. All right, so this needs to have some information for the date range. Well, I know it's G21 to G368 for the data, and I know my date range is in column A, so all I have to do is cut and paste what was here and just change this to A. And the first one before the comma is the title of the series, which is right there. So now you see my title of the series, the blue line is the trade weighted dollar, and this particular one, since it's going to go on x-axis, well, it automatically entered in the date range when I did it for the other series, but the title of that one is this US government minus S&P return. Now it still looks bad because their numbers go negative. I don't need this extra zero there. That's just extra wasted space on there. So I need to start fixing the axes. I need to make this orange one on the right axis. So to make the orange one on the right axis, so I just click in the center here. That was a left click, and then I right click, and I do change chart type. Sorry, not change chart type. I do, let's see, maybe I have to click on the data. Yep, I do. I had to click on the data, and I do change series chart type, okay? And then I just make this series secondary axis. And now I have two different axes. Now let me show you how I did this again. I just clicked on this, so the data. I could have done it for the other one too. So that was a left click, and then I right click and I did change series chart type. Now I could have also made this, changed this here from a line to a shaded area, right? Sometimes shaded looks better in the background. I'm going to just leave it as 2-line charts though. So now I have this data here. But again, now I have this extra 0 here, extra 0 here. I have this thing bunched up in here. This needs to be low. So let's start fixing this. So if I click on the dates, this is the left click on dates, and I right click on it. I could go to Format Axes, the labels. So I clicked on labels and I just make that low. So now this is down, it's clear where it is, okay? So that's good. And then over on the left, I don't want this extra 0, so I get rid of that label, and this is down here with the number. And the percentage should be 0. That extra 0 gave me no information. It was just using up space on the graph, so you really don't want that. And then go over to the right one. Somehow my resolutions messed that up there for a second. And make that 0, okay? Something else I didn't mention to you, actually, let me just think about something for a second. What I was thinking about is this graph looks exactly opposite of that graph. You know, notice when the dollar is going up, bonds outperform stocks, or in this particular case, when the dollar goes up, bonds are underperforming stocks. The reason why is when I created this, I did stocks minus bonds. I needed it to be the other way around. F minus E would be bonds minus stocks. I changed this one here, and I'm just going to double click to bring it down, and now the two graphs look much more the same. All right, now the colors. So first of all, since the resolution in the room I'm teaching you is not so good, I changed this to 11 font, okay? And I want to change, so I clicked on the whole graph. I want to change everything to darker black because that shows up a little bit better. Let's see, I've been doing gold for the left axis, so I go to Format. So first of all, I clicked on it, you see, and then I just changed that to the gold here. And on the right axis, I changed this to black, all right? And then I like to have the inside highlighted, so I clicked on this. Let's go out here. I clicked on the inside right there, and then I do an outline. But if I do that, it's not thick enough, so I kind of like the, personally, I like this a little thicker. So I changed the weight to 2 1/4, and there's the graph, and this looks very much like this, all in 23 minutes. Now, over here, I run the correlation between them as well. So if you haven't done correlations, we can create this. I'm going to just get the formatting, so I don't have to recopy the format over here. So the formatting of here, how I would have done that is I would highlight the cells, go up here to the formatting, okay, and then I can change the font color, and you know, this was a reference. Let's see. So the reason why it's not giving me the government and all these labels is because each one of those was referenced. So I can make this S&P 500 and trade weighted dollar in US Gov. And then this is S&P 500, trade weighted dollar, US Gov. I'm going to do the same thing here. And maybe I have to change this to USD. Oops. Okay. All right, and then I just need to run the correlations. Well, with itself is always 1. So the correlation, but I want to do this for the annual returns, not for the actual price. So this one would be just the correlation of, let's see, this is S&P 500 with US dollar. This first column over here is S&P 500, and the US dollar is right there. And I need to make sure I did it all the way down to the very end. So it went a little bit too far. And there's the correlation. S&P 500 and US dollar are negatively correlated. And then if I just copy this formula to here, then I can just change the reference. This is S&P 500 to US government bonds. So I just drag that over there. And it's US dollar to, so I'm just going to copy this. And it's US dollar to government bonds, which was that column. And I change this back to black with a white font. There we go. Okay. All right, now this is creating these graphs within Excel. I prefer to do it here, but if you're doing a lot of exploratory stuff, trying to figure out the relationships and you want to work really quickly, generally you're going to want to do this with NFACS at first. If you already kind of know the relationships because you have a lot of experience, I've been doing this almost 30 years now. But if you don't have all that experience and you just see something from someone else or you're just thinking about an idea and you want to do it relatively quickly, you may want to do it in inner charting and FactSet. So to get to interact, so I said inner charting, it's interactive charting. So to get to that, you just hit this little search button up here and you do interactive charting. Mine's already open, so I'm not going to do anything. Now, typically on here, you would enter the ticker symbols up here. And I did do that. I entered the ticker symbols for the trade weighted dollar, the US government bond index, and the S&P 500. But when I did that, I can't manipulate the data and change it to an annual return. So instead of doing this, I went to the plots. And when you open this up, it may actually look like this. And you have to hit this, double left arrow to get the plot options. And what I did is then I looked up trade weighted dollar, the US government bond, S&P 500 by clicking on plus series, all right? And then I did more series. And when I do that, it's the exact same menu that you just saw a little bit ago when we were using the Excel version. So we'll just let this thing open up. So you see it's the exact same menu. Okay. And then I had to look up the series in here. And how I, okay. Now, how did so they're already here because the graphs has already created all my series. Now, it's interesting, when I was looking up the series, I had a hard time finding the trade weighted dollar. For some reason, it was listed in commodities, where, of course, it's an exchange rate, but it may be traded on some, commodity index. And then also when I was looking up one of these, when I had my filter applied to US, you would think it's a FTSE fixed income US government bond index that it would work with a sort for US securities. The FTSE didn't show up. Why? Because FTSE is like owned by a UK firm. It's, I believe, I'm actually not sure about that. I think it's owned by a private equity firm now. So it may be someplace in Europe. But when I did my source based on US, it didn't come in. So I had to get rid of my filters. So I think I had this filtered, somehow I had it a filter for US. All right, so you can see I put FTSE US government local currency, and this is the one I chose. And then the look up S&P 500, put it on SPX. Now, it's not a fixed income index, it's an equity index. So here's an S&P 500. The one that FactSet created is called just SP50, and this is the one I use. And then for the dollar, so when I click on currency, sorry, well, now it's actually showing up here. Before, when I did this, when I used exchange rates, it didn't show up. And maybe that's because I have the US filter on, and when I took it off, it is properly showing up as exchange rates. You'll get the hang of this as you use it more. Now, if you look at this graph, this doesn't look at all like the graph I did in Excel. I mean, because this is just the prices. So what this is graphing is these three columns going back over time. How much time? So we have a custom date range. This is only ending on 2020, so I don't really want to do a custom date range. Let's say at 30 years. That's the data that's downloaded in Excel right now. But you may want to scroll into a period of time to look at, well, this is how these three assets reacted in that period of time in history, and we think this period that's coming up is going to be like the past, so you may want to do a custom period, and then you have a start date, there's a calendar here, and an end date. So I don't want to do that, I just want to do 30 years. But I need this to be an annual return of the dollar, where the dollar is the blue, and I need it to show that versus bonds minus the stock returns. So I can do that right on here, or I could download this data to Excel. So if I go to the wrench key and I export this data to Excel with FDS codes, so then it'll download to Excel. Actually, let's just show you this. Now, if you're using the online version, you can download it. You can't download it to an active spreadsheet, but you can download it to a new spreadsheet. So this will download the codes where I can refresh this graph after another month's go by. If you don't have the Excel add-in, you're just probably going to want to download the raw data, right? So, but I'm going to download the actual codes to a single worksheet. Now, before I did that, I put my cursor into a new tab down here, because if it was in the original tab, it would have overwritten this data. Now, I don't remember if I'm downloading, so it actually is opening up a new file, but there's a way to also do it to the active spreadsheet that you have open. It's going out and getting the data now, and now it's downloaded this data, okay? So, and then you can do all your other functions, your year-over-year changes and stuff right in here. Right, but I want to do it in the graph. So, and by the way, you can also print, export this graph. Obviously, you can cut and paste this, but the formatting is not right. The colors are not right. Now, you can left click on this and change the colors. So if I left click on it, then I right click on it, plot options, clear plots, draw style, I could do column, frequency, format. And I could start changing the colors with format. Normally I don't, I just do that in Excel, it's easier. All right, so let's create annual changes in this. So get a graph that kind of looks like the one I have in Excel. That's what we're going for. I'm waiting for the data to appear in here, so I'm just waiting for Excel, or waiting for FactSet. Okay, so the data is here. So I need to do an annual change of the dollar. All right, so I'm just going to click on this little down arrow and make this a growth rate and year ago change. By the way, I normally do 1 year change in this, not monthly, not quarterly. And the reason why there's so much noise happening in a monthly and quarterly and daily returns, you're going to get much better relationships if you're using like a 1 year. I got to make this 1 year too. And I got to make this one 1 year. Now remember, I wanted to look at the 1 year change of this relative to the 1 year change in the government minus the S&P 1 year return. I can do that right in here. If I just hit OK here, I'm just going to have 3 lines with the year over year change in each, but I want 2 lines. So I can down here, do the down little area, do the down arrow to bring up the menu, and then you just see the difference. Wait, which one do I want to do? All right, series math. I want to subtract from the government bond returns here, subtract the S&P 500. And now you have government bonds minus S&P 500 is 7 minus about 28 minus 21 and a half. Yeah, it is. All right, so now I can just delete these two, remove, Now there's other things you can do in here too. So I'm just showing you a couple. So we have moving averages, annualized returns. We got the series math. We had, by the way, you see restore series. I've never used that, but I'm assuming we can restore everything to the beginning if we didn't like it. Advanced. There's a different one I'm actually trying to find for you that gives you all kinds of different options. That's the one. Advanced transformations gives you a whole additional menu of things that you can do. So I don't even know what some of these are. What is a COPPOC indicator, right? So they're going to list the data items up here and the things you can do in the middle. I just, for the sake of time, I'm not going to. I just want to show you what's here. I'm going to hit cancel. Right, I'm just going to hit the OK button. And now this looks very similar to what we had in Excel with 2 different axes too. So it did put it on 2 different axes. Are great. I don't know which one's necessarily which one, but you can click on it. That was a left click. And then I can do right click and I can see which axes. So it automatically did it. And this one I want on the right axis. That's the axis it is on. And then I could just download this data too, and then format the background and everything else. So, but that's how you do it right within FactSet, and you may want to do it in FactSet because it's quicker to go through all kinds of data items trying to figure out the relationships. I'm going to just do one other little thing at the end to go a little bit beyond this to show you how to use this again. So I'm going to X out this plot, start all over. And I'm just going to get a price series in here. And then once I did the price series, I don't know if you noticed before, but this was grayed out. I could do, let's say I'm going to, because I know I'm going to do 2 consumer indices relative to each other. So I'm going to do S&P 500, consumer discretionary sector. All right, that's it over time. And I'm going to compare this to the S&P 500 consumer staples. So this is going to be able to show me a relative graph of both of them. And this is absolute. So looking at this one versus this one, looking at the absolute value of the prices. Now this is a different type of index that I want, I can always left click it, then right click it, and the draw style make that a line. But if I wanted to do relative, I wanted to show how consumer discretionary is doing relative to consumer staples. I just changed this to relative to. Now, now both of these are now showing it relative to the S&P 500. So you can see recently the consumer staples is doing really poorly versus S&P 500, where discretionary is actually doing much better. Both of these are showing versus this SP 50 index, okay? And it starts at 100. So if the 100 goes to, 116, that means the consumer staples, the greenish line, outperformed the S&P 500 by 16%. And when that happened, discretionary went from 100 to about 78, which means discretionary over the period of time staples was outperforming, discretionary underperformed, because this is a 70, it was a 78, underperformed by 22%. Actually, you want to do discretionary relative to staples. So I'm just going to copy the ticker symbol for staples and put it right there. Now I don't need, this one is staples relative to itself, so it's a flat line. So I'm just going to go in here, do that little down arrow and say clear all. And now what I'm doing is showing you discretionary relative to consumer staples. So what determines when discretionary does really well relative to consumer staples? Well, then I want to add some economic series to this. So I do plus series. So I have, again, a price return graph of two assets relative to each other. I'm not using an annual return, one versus the other. I'm just using the price of one versus the other and an index. And then let's just throw in some economic series. I'm just going to throw in, let's do inflation. And inflation is an economic data item. And there is CPI. So I will add, now notice there's no date range on this. It's because it's using a date range that's already in here. So in interactive charting, it knows what date range, when we were in Excel, it asked me for a date range. Well, Excel didn't know what date range the graph was showing because we didn't have any graph. Right now we have a 30-year graph, so this is, not even showing you the menu for date range. So I'm just going to do CPI, and I want an annual change in CPI. So, and then I just hit OK. And now what you're seeing is well, I'm trying to look at this and trying to figure out, well, discretionary started to outperform here as inflation was coming down. Now, I would expect, by the way, as inflation to come down, we would have more discretionary income to spend on consumer discretionary items. But it's not, as good as maybe I would see. And also, by the way, I'm seeing that it's almost like consumer discretionary stocks start outperforming because it's going up relative to staples. Well, actually here inflation came down and then it outperformed, but here it's outperforming kind of almost, I don't know, inflation's really taking a nosedive down here about the same time. So I'm trying to figure out if one is leading or lagging the other, but it's very interesting that you would think that discretionary may outperform consumer staples, the things that we need, when inflation comes down, because if inflation comes down, we have more money to spend on discretionary items. But maybe it's, here they look like they're positively correlated. So maybe it's like, well, when inflation goes up, well, of course, we don't have as much discretionary income because inflation's up, but people have more jobs. So a lot of people who are unemployed are not unemployed when inflation is higher, because inflation is higher tends to be when the economy is good, the stock market's doing well, people have a lot of wealth, and that may be, and if they have a lot of wealth, maybe they're spending more money on discretionary items. When I look at the economic data versus the price data tells me what investors are thinking. The economic data tells me what's happening. We're trying to find some of these relationships, and you'll find a lot of times there is some kind of relationship between the macro and financial markets. The financial markets are just not random. All right, that's it for me today. You learned a lot. Have a great time working on figuring out relationships between macro and financial markets.